Hi, welcome to my home. My name is Robert, and today we're gonna make pine nut cookies. I'm Lebanese by origin, that's why I have an accent, and we love pine nuts. We love everything with pine nuts in Lebanon, and I love these cookies. We make them in my cooking classes. I give cooking classes at the local high school. We make these cookies in my cooking classes, and they're really very popular. So I encourage you to make them. The other thing you should know, they always better the next day. They always taste better the next day. That's my experience. So if you're gonna make them a day in advance. And they will last in a sealed container for 3-4 days. So let's start. The ingredients for this recipe are almond paste, and I use this, you don't wanna use marzipan paste because marzipan paste has sugar, extra sugar. I use almond paste. And because I need 8 ounces, I use this particular brand. But you can use any brand you want. It's almond paste. It's gluten-free. You see it's there. It's gluten-free. You're going to need some regular sugar, granulated sugar. You're going to need some confectioners sugar. You're going to need pine nuts. You're going to need almond flour. Almond flour. You don't use a lot of it, but you need almond flour. And you need 2 eggs. We're gonna use the egg whites of 2 eggs. And I'm gonna use today my food processor because it's easier, but you don't have to. I first wanna mix together the granulated sugar, the confectioner's sugar, and the almond flour. The recipe calls for 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. Then 1/2 cup of confectioner's sugar. And 1/4 cup of almond flour. And these measurements are important because if you don't follow these measurements, the consistency of the cookie is a little different. So I'm gonna just eyeball 1/4 cup. So I'm gonna mix them together. The 2 kind of sugar and the almond flour. That will be the dry ingredients. Okay, now I'm gonna take my almond paste. I'm gonna cut it into pieces and put it in my food processor. And the reason I cut it into pieces to make it easier to pulverize. We're gonna turn it into a powder. Instead of being a big block, just gonna. Now I'm gonna add the sugar and the flour. You can add them all at once, or you can do it in batches. I start by pulsing it to pulverize it. Once it gets going, I'll do it continuously. Just gonna check on the consistency. So I'm gonna do a little bit more. Okay, now I'm gonna, I just need the egg whites from the eggs of the 2. You want medium-sized eggs. You don't want them too large or too small. So 2 medium-sized eggs, the egg whites. So I have the egg whites of 2 eggs in this measuring cup, and you're gonna mix it a little bit just to make it until you're gonna mix it until it foams a little bit. You don't want to whip the egg whites. You just want to. So they look like this. Now using the food processor, we're gonna mix the egg whites with our almond paste sugar mixture. This is what it looks like when it's after you mix the egg whites with the dry ingredients. I'm gonna put the mixture into a soup bowl so I can work with it easily. We're gonna be working with our hands. I want to get every bit. Okay, so I'm gonna move my food processor aside to make room. And I got my pine nuts. I already have a package already open, so I'm gonna use the ones open. And you're gonna put your pine nuts in a bowl. And in terms of amount of pine nuts, you need about 6 ounces. This is 4.5 ounces, so I'm gonna use some of the stuff that I have left over from before. I bought them in bulk. So you're gonna put them in a bowl. And I'm gonna use a little bit of these. So the idea is we're gonna take our almond paste that is now mixed with the egg white. We're gonna form them into little meatballs, and we're gonna roll them into the pine nuts and then bake them. I'm gonna preheat your oven at 300 degrees. So they bake at kind of a low to medium heat. So this recipe is gonna make about 16 to 20 cookies depending on the size of the cookie. I'm gonna line, it takes me a couple of cookie sheets. I'm gonna line each one with parchment paper. And I usually don't cook them together, I cook one at a time. It's just a preference of mine. Okay, so now we have our almond mixture, we have our pine nuts, and I have a bowl of water because I'm gonna need to dip my, the mixture is sticky and I need to dip my hands into the water to prevent stickiness. So let's begin. So I'm gonna take with a spoon, a little amount, enough to make a meatball size amount. I dip my hand in water, make it into a small ball. It's sticky, and I roll them into the pine nuts on all sides. I put it on the cookie sheet and I flatten it till it's about 1/3 of an inch thick. If you can see, this is about the size of the cookie. Let's make another one. You can make them bigger if you want, or you make them smaller, but make sure they're 1/3 of an inch thick, otherwise they won't cook properly. I roll it into the pine nuts. So now you cannot reuse the pine nuts because they have eggs on them. Now flatten. Let's do another one. We can make a small one now if you want, a smaller one. So let's continue now. We made 3 cookies. Let's fill this whole cookie sheets, and then we'll make the second batch also. So we have a first tray ready to go into the oven. Again, I preheated the oven for 300 degrees, and they're gonna bake on average about 25 minutes. Sometimes it's 26, 27 minutes. Now, these cookies, when they are done, they're crunchy on the outside and they're soft on the inside. That's the way I like them. So you just want them, you want to remove them from the oven as soon as the pine nuts start turning brown. You don't want it too brown. It'll be hard, and that's not the way I prefer them. You may prefer them that way. So we're gonna put our pine nuts in the oven, which has been preheated at 300. And I'm gonna set the timer for 25 minutes. So we have our second tray ready to go to the oven once the first batch is done. I like a lot of pine nuts. You noticed I like a lot of pine nuts in my cookies, but if you don't like so many pine nuts, you can use less. You can use as many as you want. You can coat on one side, although it's very hard to do. I like a lot of pine nuts in my cookies, and that makes them for me delicious and yummy. They look perfect. It's a little bit brown. You don't want it too brown, and I'm gonna let them cool now for a while. I'm gonna put the second batch in the oven. "25 minutes, and they look yummy. But I'm gonna wait till tomorrow to have them. So the cookie has cooled off a little bit, and you have to remove it very carefully from the parchment paper, and that's what it looks like, and this is what the back looks like, and it looks like perfectly cooked. I hope you enjoyed my video. I want to thank my video expert, Catherine, and as we say in my country, sahtain, which is a way to say enjoy the cookies.